Hello and welcome to the Book Bunch. My name is Sam and it's so great to have you guys back for another video. And ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be addressing the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room being my Brandon Sanderson collection. And we're going to go through it and I'm going to rank them for you guys as to what ones I really like, what ones are just mediocre. Well, it's kind of hard to call any Brandon Sanderson mediocre, but mediocre compared to other Sanderson is what we're going to say. And I'm going to tell you what ones I recommend you reading, what ones I especially recommend depending on what level of a fantasy lover you are, whether it be a I'm just dipping my toes in the water fantasy person, or it's a I'm a hardcore high fantasy, absolutely need all of the everything made up kind of person. So we're going to get into that, and I hope you enjoy this video. Now you may be asking, why Sam, are you on the floor? That's craziness. Well, I'm on the floor because I decided to do this ranking system a little bit differently because everyone does the fancy tech and like puts it on their screen and all the rest of it, and that's well and good. But I have all of them as physical copies. So I thought I would physically do this on the floor for you and rank it out. And yeah, hope you enjoy it. Hopefully this isn't going to be too weird of an angle for everybody, but we're going to roll with it. So bear with me, but we're going to get this thing started. So first up, I'm going to do all the books that I have of his that are in my fancy white special edition copies. They are all paperback. Pretty much all the Sanderson I have is in paperback, but I still have some of the really nice editions, so just roll with it. They're only like $1 more than the mass market paperbacks, so yeah, you guys can also enjoy the pretty covers. Well, I'm going to start with the white because I feel like most of them are white and it'll give us a good to bad tier. Okay. I feel like I'm rambling too much. Sorry, guys. You can barely see my face, but we're just going to roll with it. So, we're going to start off strongly with Warbreaker. This is Warbreaker, guys. It's an awesome book. So, Warbreaker is a pretty heavy high fantasy book, but it is definitely easy to read, or medium to read, I would say, if you're getting into fantasy. So, it's basically about these two sisters, one of which was meant to go off and marry this half god, half king kind of figure who everyone believes to be a tyrant, and she's like been raised to know everything about the politics and this guy that she's meant to be marrying and everything, and all like the procedures and like manners and everything that she needs to have for it, because like if she offends him or whatever, she'll get killed. And it like comes to the day that she's meant to be shipped off, and the father trades her for his youngest daughter, who he doesn't like as much, which is terrible. But anyway, let's not judge other people's parenting failures, I guess. But yeah, so the younger sister, who's completely unprepared, gets shipped off instead to marry this guy, and the elder sister is now in disarray, I guess, because she's like, what is my life purpose now that I can't marry this guy and make this sacrifice for my family? And so she decides that she's going to run away and follow her sister and try and trade places back without anyone noticing. So that's Warbreaker. It's super cool. It has a really cool magic system which basically uses colour and breath, or kind of like, they call it breath because like it's not someone's soul, it's also not someone's life force, but it is what gives them colour and like a pep in their step, I guess you'd say. Like, it's what makes humans vibrant and not just dull, boring people, I guess you'd say. Um, and yeah, that can be like traded, and it's super crazy and weird. And the more breaths you have, the more powers you get, and the more colors you can see and interact with and manipulate. It's a super interesting, unique magic system that I haven't experienced before. So I'm gonna put this in like top tier Sanderson. Okay, then we have Elantris, which I did not like as much. This is much lower down on my favorites list, but this is one of his OG books. And hang on, I'm going to change this angle because it's very irritating having to lean over so far, so bear with me. Haha, this is not as bad for me. Okay, so then we have Elantris, which is, yeah, OG Sanderson. It is about this city called Elantris, which previously everyone that lived in Elantris, or like the main people that lived in Elantris, they were all these immortal figures who could do this form of magic with these characters that they basically write in the air, and those characters would then cause things to happen. So like you would draw the character for light and it would create light in the air and like different things, and they could make food with these symbols and like all sorts of things. And yeah, they were immortal, and random people would wake up in the morning as one of these beings, and so they then go to this city. And there was something that occurred, I believe it was 5 or 10 years prior to this book happening, and the city and all the people that had these powers like I don't know how to explain it, but like it ended up something like big happened, and all the people that were immortal were still immortal, but they lost all of their power and instead became super like fragile and like couldn't heal, but also couldn't die. So like if they got a little paper cut, instead of it going away, they would have that pain and that wound permanently. And so like if you like broke your ribs or anything, like you'd have to feel that pain as if it was constantly happening for the rest of your life. And so people were going crazy because of the amount of pain they were in. And yeah, basically this guy, he wakes up in the morning, he finds out he's become one of these people that are basically cursed, and he goes to the city, meets all these other cursed people, and he's like, surely there is something we can do to improve our way of life. And so he goes on this mission to try and make life less miserable for the Elantrians. And yeah, all of this stuff kind of happens. It's really good, but it just wasn't as good as some of his other things. So I'm going to put this in the middle. Then we have the Reckoner series. I am going to put them all in together because I feel like they're all pretty much in the same level of alrightness. I didn't not like them, but compared to other Sanderson, again, they're just not as top tier. However, if you like superheroes at all, this is for you, 100%. So, like, Elantris is like middle level, like low to middle level fantasy. So, like, if you're like a beginner to an intermediate, I'd recommend Elantris. If you're like an intermediate, I would recommend Warbreaker. If you're not a fantasy person at all, but you're a superhero person, definitely pick up the Reckoner series, because the whole thing is just him imagining what it would be like to write a superhero story. And it's not even really a superhero story, it's more a supervillain story because all of the people with powers are evil. And the Reckoners are a group of normal humans who are trying to take them down. It's super interesting. I really liked the concept. And if I didn't know this was a Sanderson series and like I was just reading this as someone who had never read Sanderson before, I really love it because I do really like superhero stuff. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. But because it is Sanderson and because his other works are better, I think it should go in the middle. Actually, I think Elantra should be underneath and the Reckoners should be in the middle. So here we go. Here's the middle, here's the top, here's the bottom. Then we've got Arcanum Unbounded. This is a collection of short stories, novellas, and just random bits of information about the Cosmere. So the Cosmere is Sanderson's universe that he has created where all of these different books take place, and they can all be read as standalone. You don't have to read any of the others to like you're not missing anything if you decide not to read the others, if that makes sense in regards to the larger story. But if you are interested in the larger story, then you need to read Arcanum Unbounded. Likewise, if you read Mistborn, I would recommend getting it because this has a couple of Mistborn stories in it, like novellas and stuff, that are really good, and I do recommend. There is also a couple of like completely unrelated short stories that aren't to do with any of the books that or worlds he's previously established, which I absolutely loved, which I definitely recommend as well. I'll tell you my favourite ones because it'll give you a good idea. So I really liked Mistborn Secret History because I really liked Mistborn. And especially if you liked the first book in the Mistborn series, you should read The Secret History. But read it after you've finished reading the Mistborn trilogy. I really liked White Sand, which is part of his graphic novel, which I don't have his 2 graphic novels. The only Sanderson I don't have is his 2 graphic novels because I can't get them here in Australia, and his middle grade series called Alcatraz and the Evil Librarians, just because they're very expensive and there's a lot of them, and to get them here would cost me a lot of money, so I'm just kind of holding off on that for now. But I have all his other things. So the other ones that were really good was Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, which is like a complete standalone, and Six of the Dust, which was also a complete standalone. They were both super good. So I recommend picking this up for anyone who likes any Sanderson, basically. It does also help you as well because there are some that are meant to be read after certain books in the bigger series. It does tell you at the start, so you can just avoid them until you're ready to read them. So I'm going to put this one in the middle, but really it's like halfway between because I don't want to make this scale too big. Then we have Mistborn Era 2, which is his Wild West series set in the world of Mistborn. I don't love this series. If this had been standalone and it had been set in its own world and it was just like the Cowboys genre, I wouldn't mind it very much. Like I would have liked it a lot more than I did. But because it's meant to follow up from Mistborn and it's still meant to have the magic system of Mistborn, I feel like it really retracts from it because it lessens the effect and the coolness, I guess, of the magic system that is in Mistborn. So I didn't really like it very much. I will continue to read it because he's still releasing more books from this series. I believe the next one, The Lost Medal, it comes out like this month or something. And I will get it just because I want to finish the series, but I don't love it. It also is the only Sanderson that I've read so far that hasn't been 100% clean. So just be aware of that. It's very in passing, the unclean parts in it. So you can kind of just ignore it, but just be aware of that. So this is going at the bottom for me. Like right at the bottom, like probably even below Elantris, to be honest. But again, I don't want to like make the scale too big. So we're going to put it down there. Then we have OG Mistborn, which I do only have in the mass market paperback, which I don't hate, but yeah. I like the size of these because they're smaller. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but they're smaller. And I like the hand, like it feels nicer in my hand to be this size because I have small hands. But yeah, Mistborn, my favorite. My favorite. If you are new to fantasy and like new to high fantasy, I would read Mistborn because yes, it is high fantasy, but the way it is explained and the way it is written is just so easy that like you don't even need to keep a big pile of notes to remember it all. And yeah, he just does such a good job at explaining it. So Mistborn follows a girl named Vin, and she has Mistborn powers, which basically means she can eat certain metals and they will give her powers. So like if she eats one metal, I believe it's steel, although I can't remember what one is what, it will allow her to like push things away from her that are metal. And if she eats a different kind of metal, she can then pull everything that's metal towards her. And there's like all these different ones that you can do. So Mistborns are people who have the ability to do all of them. And then there's these other ones called Allomancers that only have the ability to do one metal. So like they might only be able to pull things and that's it. So they just hone that skill. And she gets wrapped up in this ragtag crew who want to take down the Lord Emperor, who is basically pretending to be a god, and he's said to be immortal and stuff like that. And yeah, she gets swept up in this plot to take him out, and then all of this stuff happens afterwards. It is tragic. It will make you cry and scream, and I did hit my head against the book quite a few times, and against the series, but it was so good. I loved every moment of it. So that is Mistborn. I'm definitely going to reread it more than once in my lifetime. But yeah, definitely the best of the best. So that's Mistborn. Then we've got Stormlight Archive, Way of Kings. I am yet to read his other books in this series. I do own them. I just haven't gotten to it, and I got impatient when it came to making this video and kind of ran out of time because they're over 1,200 pages each. So yes, I can only talk about Stormlight as someone who has only read the first one, but I will update you guys when I finish the actual series. But The Way of Kings, very good, very heavy high fantasy. I would not recommend this unless you are a high fantasy lover and you are like advanced. This is probably his most advanced one out of everything. I feel like if you're a beginner, you could probably get away with anything on this list but Warbreaker, because that one's probably intermediate, but this one definitely don't go near it. Unless you're prepared to write a novel of notes to go with it, because it is full on. I was only just able to keep up with it without having to write notes, and that's because I read a lot of fantasy. But this has a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different characters that you follow. I think there's like maybe 10 in this book alone that you swap between perspectives of, so you have to be okay with that, with the storyline jumping all over the place. But this one isn't as action packed as Mistborn. So this is more, because this is preparing for an epic fantasy series where there's going to be like 10 plus books. It's a lot slower paced. So you see things in a much more detailed light, I guess you could say. Like Mistborn, you jump through, like, because it all takes place over like a year or something. You don't get like a day-to-day account of what's happening, whereas this is much more of a day-to-day account. Not quite that dramatic, like it probably jumps around a couple of days here and there. But like it's all of this 1200 plus pages happens within like a couple of week period, and it's just like everyone's different perspectives of what's happening in this short period of time. And yeah, it's a bit like watching daily vlogs, I guess. Like things happen because things happen in life, but it's more like watching a daily vlog, whereas Mistborn is like watching a movie, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. But this follows a bunch of characters who are involved in this war against these people called the Parshendi, who are these almost otherworldly people because they can grow armor out of their bodies, almost like an insect, but they're meant to be human as far as I am aware. And they just are very different culturally, and they assassinated or claim to be responsible for the assassination of the king. And this is set, like the main bulk of the story is set 5 years after, so they're still at war with each other for that assassination. And you follow all these different people and what's happened to them in those 5 years, mostly focusing on what's currently happening. And yeah, it was good, but not nearly as emotional or heart-wrenching as Mistborn. But it was very good. I'd still put it at the top, just probably under Mistborn. And then we have The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds, which is so weird for a Sanderson. Like, this is not, I wouldn't even say this is fantasy. Like, I guess it is, but like it's not. Because this follows a guy who's just in the normal world, but he has a unique mental illness, which is similar to schizophrenia, but I wouldn't say is actually schizophrenia, because he knows that what he is seeing are completely like delusions, and his delusions know that they are delusions, but he can hear them, see them, feel them, and if he doesn't let the delusions play out, then he basically has a mental breakdown. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's explained well in the book. I'm just not very good at relaying it. But yeah, and this guy, he gets hired by people to solve these weird mysteries and these weird crimes, because each of his delusions are a person that has their own personality and their own specialty. So like one of them will be a historian, and one of them will be a hacker, and one of them will be a martial arts specialist or whatever. And he uses these delusions to solve these crimes and these things. It's super interesting. It's basically what it would be like to have a very compartmentalized brain where you can, like anything you read and learn, you remember for the rest of your life. But instead of him just being able to call on that whenever, his manifests in the form of a delusion that he then like just listens to, and they tell him what's going on. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining it well. But it was pretty good. Very weird to read as a Sanderson. Like, I would not have thought Sanderson had written this. But still pretty good. I'd put it in the middle. And finally, we're getting to the black stack. And then we're kind of done, basically. But we've got the Rhythmatist, which I absolutely loved. This is a middle grade / YA, which is about this guy who lives in a world where the magic system is these certain people get gifted with this ability to turn very mathematical chalk drawings into beings that can attack and do different things. And they are called Rhythmatists. And this guy, he desperately wanted to be a Rhythmatist, and he studied it with all of his heart, and he learnt every single drawing that he was meant to know, every mathematical equation to help with that, every angle, every perfect circle, everything, and all the symbols that go along with it. But he was not gifted with the ability to make them come alive. But he decides that he wants to be apprenticed to one of these master rhythmatists anyway to learn it, just because he loves it and he wants to end up writing books about them. And so he gets apprenticed to this guy, and the only other apprentice that gets taken on with him is this girl who has the ability to turn things alive, but she sucks at the drawing part, and she sucks at the precision for the drawing. She's got a creative mind and can draw like creative chalklings, which are the beings that you draw to come alive. But the actual like symbols and circles and lines and angles and stuff that you have to draw before you draw the chalklings, like your defense circles and stuff, she sucks at doing, and so she keeps getting attacked or not being able to manifest things properly. And so he decides that he's going to help her practice the like angles and everything so that she can become better, because their school gets under attack. Sorry, the phone is ringing in the background and there is a lot of cars driving past, so sorry if there's like a lot of background noise. But yeah, so he teams up with her to help her because their school comes under attack by these evil rhythmatists who are killing students and causing people to disappear. And so they team up on this wild thing to try and like defend their school and hunt down these evil people. It's really interesting. I really loved it. I had a great time. I can't wait for him to release more in the series, because he has promised he will eventually get back to this series, even though it's been like 10 years since he last wrote a book for this. Like, this is a standalone currently because he never wrote book 2. But he says at the end of this that he's promised to write book 2. So I'm waiting. I'm waiting, Sanderson. But it is top tier. I liked that more than Wave Kings. And finally, for the Black Stack, is the Skyward series, which I have all the books in. I love this series. I love it. I love it because I am a science fiction geek at heart. And if you guys know me, you know that it's my favorite genre. And when he wrote a science fiction series, I jumped on board immediately. And I immediately fell in love with it. It is so good. Skyward is about this girl named Spencer, and she is stuck on a planet with the remaining humans. And they've been stuck on this planet for 80 years, and they've had to live underground because every time they try and come to the surface or try and leave the planet, they get attacked by these aliens called the Krell, and they haven't been able to leave the planet or become spacefaring people again. or even return to Earth if that's a possibility. And she desperately wants to be a pilot because they have these starfighter pilots, and she desperately wants to be one, but she isn't really allowed to join them because like her father was like the best one they ever had, but something happened and he basically became a deserter or a traitor kind of situation. And so she's kind of been raised with this shame over her, and she isn't allowed to become a starfighter pilot. But anyway, things end up happening in the first book very quickly on, and she ends up being allowed to join the academy under certain conditions. And one of those conditions is that like she's not allowed to live on base with the other people. They're not going to feed her, they're not going to look after her, so she has to find a way to get from her house to the academy and stuff every day, and it's like basically across half of the planet. And yeah, she gets treated very poorly, but she ends up being a really good pilot. And all of these things happen, and there's like a war that she's involved in and stuff, and it's really good. And I can't tell you what the other books are about because I would spoil things, but things get crazy in such a good way, and you need to go read it. You need to go read it. It is super easy to read. It's super, like, yeah, just clean and smooth to read. Very fast to read. So if you're a beginner in sci-fi or fantasy, I would recommend it because it is super, super easy to keep track of. And this also goes at the top. So that's my Sanderson, guys. Yeah, that's my ranking system for any of you guys who even cared. And that's kind of what his different books are about. It is a super interesting universe to be a part of. I really love it. Some of them aren't part of the universe as far as I'm aware, like Skyward, I believe, is on its own. The Rhythmatists, I believe, are on their own, and I think Stephen Leeds is on their own. But Mistborn, Warbreaker, Stormlight, Arcanium, Elantris, all of that, they are all part of the one universe. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want. And like I said, you could pick up any of these and read it by itself, and you wouldn't be like, oh, now I need to go read 20 books to understand this bigger story, because you really don't need to. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I'm going to now cut to a clip just showing you guys the ranking system a little bit better, the different covers that I've got. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!